thank you to Fiona for being here today. If you don't know of Fiona yet, Fiona lived with 25 years of chronic pain and she is now fully recovered. She's a trainee clinical psychologist at the University of Oxford, and she is very much hoping to work with people with chronic symptoms once she's recovered. She's also an ambassador for Living Proof, which we're very proud of. And she does so much work in the mind body community to raise awareness of the neuroplastic approach to healing and to raise hope for recovery. Many of you will know that she recently appeared in Dr. Chatterjee's Channel 4 documentary, which was all about drug-free healing. And you'll be able to hear much more of her story today than you were able to hear in that little segment if you saw that. So welcome, Fiona, and thank you so much for being on Stories of Hope today.
Thank you so much. I am a huge Living Proof fan, and I feel so lucky to get to do this. Actually, it's such a lovely thing. I think this for me is my favorite type of thing to do. It's all about saying to people that, what worked for me might very well help you as well. And so it's just so exciting to come and do this.
Oh, thank you. We're excited to have you here. So let's dive into your story. And if we could, let's go back to the beginning. And could you tell us a little bit about how your chronic pain, your chronic symptoms that initially arose?
Yeah, so I was very young. I was 11 years old when my pain started, which in some ways I think is unusual. I think lots of people, we think of pain as affecting people later on in life, but actually, I mean, really there are a good number of children in pain, unfortunately. And I was very unlucky with mine. I had a couple of incidents, and it's very hard to pin it down. The year before I developed pain, I broke my ankle in a PE class, and nothing too complex. But it was a sort of a moment of, maybe something had gone wrong with my body. And I was doing some riding lessons, wasn't a very good rider, but was very enthusiastic, and was thrown off the horse and was knocked unconscious, which again, at the time there was no physical injury. But I think those two things, looking back, there was something there in terms of a moment of sort of unsafety in my body and not really knowing, not my body being a bit mysterious, I guess, in terms of the healing, and had sort of aches and pains carrying on. But I came out of both of those things out of pain. But then I started secondary school, and really woke up one morning and my knee was aching, and it kind of got worse over a week, and caused a lot of confusion right from the very beginning. But really, that was the start of it. Stayed from that point, and I developed pain in my spine and my hips and my ankles, and yeah, I ended up with very severe pain in multiple joints in my body. So very difficult, just 11 years old, and going into those big changes with secondary school to navigate, really.
Oh, yes, so hard, Fiona, just thinking about you as a little child in so much pain and just, puzzled really as well as to what was causing it. I'm so sorry for your experience. So at that time, how did your doctors try to treat your symptoms?
So I went to the GP, and it was a case of, initially I very much went to the doctor thinking I'm going to be told that I've sprained something. I'm going to be maybe given some crutches and some anti-inflammatories, told to go away and rest, and it'll get better. And I think that the GP was probably thinking the same initially. And when the pain didn't go away, I was tested. I had, x-rays, they scanned me, they did all sorts of blood tests. They probably made a mistake in saying, oh, well, we've got to rule out cancer because it might be cancer and there might be something going wrong, but we haven't, we need to dig a bit harder to find. And they got very caught up on this idea of I'd had a virus and it had gone to my hip and kind of and my knee and settled there, which didn't really make sense to me as an 11-year-old. And actually, one of the first things they did, I mean, this was sort of weeks into my pain, and it seems a very strange course of action now, but they were so stumped, and they sort of said, well, I was telling them that it was getting easier when I rested. So they actually admitted me to hospital for 2 weeks. And they said the idea is that you don't move and that you rest completely and it'll go away. And so I remember they had this traction device, which they used to use if you'd broken your leg. And they tied that to my good leg because that was I didn't need it medically, but it was their idea was that if something was literally tying me to the bed and I couldn't get out, then I would be, on this forced bed rest. So I stayed in that bed for 2 weeks, and at the end of it was not actually pain free. And so they kind of carried on with these different investigations. I had many scans and tests and investigations, different hospitals. Went in actually quite early on to sort of medical pain management programs, where it was kind of the idea was that they could assess how I moved, and they could like really get to the bottom of, well, was something going on in my life that that they were missing. So lots and lots of different tests, and I don't think they really had any, there was no sort of unified sense of like, this is what we're going to do. I think they were just throwing everything at me to try and work out the cause, and still coming up with no answers, and saying, well, you shouldn't actually be in pain, and we can't understand it.
Oh my goodness. I'm just really thinking about a child going through that experience, Fiona. And, I know from having symptoms at a young age myself how hard that is. And then also, my own children are a similar age to that. And I just think of them being put on forced bed rest and going through an experience like that. And it's absolutely devastating. I'm so sorry that you went through that. Uh,
Yeah, thank you. And I think the thing to say as well is that they've done so much work now. We understand so much about pain, and actually not moving is not the thing that nobody's advised that now, and it sort of boggles my mind a bit. But I think it highlights really how lost they were with what to do with me.
hmm. So none of the treatments that they could offer at that time provided any lasting relief to you.
No, well, do you know the really weird thing? So they tried me on increasingly stronger medications, and I remember the sense of, I'd sit in front of the doctor, and they'd say, "How's the pain?" And I'd say, "Well, it's still terrible." And they'd say, "Okay, let's try you on this medication. We'll see you in a few weeks." And by 13, it was so demoralizing and depressing and frightening, because actually there was a sense of, I was a child. You think about a doctor as taking things, problems away, and had a very black and white view of it, which I think is very normal as a child. And of course, these increasingly strong medications didn't help. They funnily enough, they put me into one pain management program where the pain did ease off actually for a few weeks. And I think I was 12. It was still really early on. And I came back to that a lot later on as to, well, why I hated these physio programs. I was quite brutal. I was doing 2 hours of physio a day and 2 hours of hydrotherapy. So I'd go down in the morning, do an hour of physio, an hour of hydro. I'd be made to sit through hospital school, I was in a lot of pain. So that was very upsetting and very difficult, sitting on a hard chair. Another hour of physio, another hour in the swimming pool. And so, it was very frightening. I didn't want to do it. And I have lots of memories of that being very scary. But actually there was this period of a few weeks where the pain went. And now that I understand how the brain works with pain, I understand more about why I was able to get out of pain for a little while. But I was sent back to school. I was not in a happy school environment. I was being bullied. There was actually, I think that it's very important to be open in terms of my journey, because I think it is very helpful to others. But I experienced some sexual abuse at a friend's house, and I'm very mindful that that's quite a big topic. So obviously, if people want to make sure people take care of themselves in the context of attending this evening, and obviously do what they need, because it's not an uncommon experience. But I was sent back into this school environment where I was right back into a very frightening environment, and of course the pain came back, and just as mysteriously as it had turned up the first time. And again, there was this real sense of, I knew the pain was real. It was very bad. It was very debilitating. I was really struggling with walking quite quickly from that. But nobody, again, everyone was very baffled, and they were trying the same things. I went into another hospital and another pain management program, and that actually didn't help on that occasion. So that was the one moment where I had some relief, but we didn't understand it. The doctors didn't, my family didn't, I didn't, it wasn't sort of easily explainable at the time.
Oh, Fiona, I'm so sorry for your experience. I just
Mhm.
really want to pause and say that I'm very, very sorry. And could you just talk a little bit more about the impact on a child's life, on somebody's life, to be living with these really debilitating chronic pain symptoms, and going through the medical system trying to find answers and not really getting anywhere. What was the impact on your quality of life and the things you could do at that time?
Yeah, and I think I went from being very active. We were out walking lots as kids, and we were, I got to do a little bit of horse riding, and I remember we went to roller skating club, and just we were just very active, and there was lots of happiness and lots of running around, and loved dancing. And I was then in a position when I got the pain where I was really struggling with walking. So um, I was on crutches, and yeah, really, really struggling to move, finding sort of sitting in a chair very painful, which obviously when you're 12 or 13 and school life is about sitting in a chair all day. So that became very scary. And I remember, I mean, I dropped out of school largely because it was so difficult, but I remember sitting in school and just trying not to cry because it was so painful just sitting on the chair, and everyone else was oblivious because of course they were kids and young teens, and sort of it just doesn't occur to you as to most young teens that that's difficult. So I lost all of my hobbies, and I ended up, in fact, I was refusing to go to school, quite understandably, because it was so painful. But I was then spending a lot of my time in bed, and I found that was where I got relief. That was where I maybe had a little bit more control. Not all the time. I was in a lot of pain lying down as well, but that became a lot of my life, was lying there and not doing very much, not keeping up with my studies, not seeing my friends, thinking, well, what on earth is going to happen to me, in terms of everyone else was at school and they were working towards, it wasn't like we had formal exams at that age, but there's a sense of life is moving forward and you need to keep up with it. And I was dropping behind. So life was very disrupted. And actually, really by 13, I was getting very, very depressed, which again, I think most people would understand that when life is so disrupted, it's depression is then going to turn up, as a lot of people living with pain, I think, can understand that experience of then getting depressed as well, because it's hard.
Yeah, absolutely. I always say that chronic pain has these like long tentacles and they reach into every part of your life, don't they? So
Yeah.
social life, ability to exercise, I mean,
Yeah.
everything really. And then for a child, like it would impact schooling, socialization, exercise, your sense of yourself, your identity, because you're a person with pain, that's who you start to identify with, and that just ability to have a normal life, do all the things that kids should be doing, and very much that impact on mental health, the depression, the anxiety that we experience when we live with chronic pain every day. And I deeply, deeply empathize with that, Fiona.
Yeah, thank you. And I think, one of the things that was coming out of the pain management program was this sense of like, well, you need to be pushed to move. And I think it's a really big thing in pain science, this thing about that people get scared of moving. And I think that I do feel like now I understand recovery, it's really important to say that it does become part of the picture, that you almost that your brain gets the message that moving isn't safe because we stop moving, and then then you get more pain. But actually, when you are in severe pain and it hurts to move, it is also a very normal reaction to then not move. And so there I was as a kid going to bed and saying, don't make me do these things, I don't want to go to physio, I don't want to go to school. And it was a real battle with my doctors, and there was a lot of actually hostility from them, because they were having to fight with me so much to try and do these things. But actually, it is such a natural response when you're in pain to have this instinct of maybe being scared of doing too much or moving, even if that's not then actually a long-term helpful to then not move. And it's just about, to my mind, it's really important that I'm not sure that there is enough of a patient voice where we get to say back, well, actually, we don't necessarily move when we're in pain because it feels protective, and it's a very normal response to hurting.
Yeah, a very, very human response to try to protect yourself from further
Mm.
hurt and further harm when you're experiencing such severe symptoms. So
Mhm.
I just want to fast forward a little bit, if that's okay, and because I know eventually you did come across a different way of understanding your symptoms. So could you just tell us a little bit about how you came across pain science, so the neuroscience that explains the symptoms you experienced in a very different way?
Yeah, so having done, I'd done all these different pain management programs in hospital when they tried to say that the brain is involved in pain. And I had been very sure that no, I know that there's something wrong with me physically. I wouldn't be in pain for no reason. It's not my brain. And I'd been very determined that this wasn't the answer for me. And then many, many years later, I then also developed ME/CFS in my 20s. And I had various other problems. I had some issues with interstitial cystitis as well, and POTS, which is heart rate issues. And I had all these different diagnoses, and having spent years, I ended up having some really quite invasive medical interventions in my 20s in particular, and that also, wasn't the answer. That's not the thing that cured me. So I really was kind of coming around to getting to a point of thinking, actually, I really can't live my life this way, and I really need some kind of answer. And I don't know what it's going to be, but I'm desperate. And as I was really feeling that, around that time, I started getting adverts on my Instagram actually for this pain website called Curable. And I looked at it and it said, had the words biopsychosocial model. And I thought, I am not looking at this. This is not the answer to me. This is something that's going to tell me that my symptoms are all in my head. And they're going to tell me to push myself and that my pain's not real and I'm paying too much attention to it. And I was really quite cross about it. And the advert kept coming up. I was obviously desperate. And I saw these testimonials from people saying, please, if you've had bad experiences with these kind of ideas, just give it another go, because this is incredible and this has changed my life. And I really decided once and for all, I was going to show myself that, I had tried everything. My pain definitely wasn't all in my head. And I signed up to this website and gave it my all, and was completely, right from the beginning went, wow, this is something, the way that they're explaining this is different. This is new to me. And this explains why I'm in pain. And it really was a matter of weeks. And I was then completely pain-free, having had years and years and years of being very disabled by the pain and by the fatigue as well. And that was it. That was my answer.
Wow, incredible, Fiona. So can you tell us a little bit about how that was explained to you, that, the pain science that you came to understand and then were able to view your symptoms through a completely different lens, I guess the lens of the nervous system. Can you just explain that for people, how it shaped
Yeah.
their understanding?
I feel so. I think the first thing that was so important to me with that website is that, this explanation of like, we believe that you're in pain, we know that your pain is real, and we're not about to tell you that it's not real. And that was I'd never really had somebody say that to me, and it was so needed. It was such a compassionate thing. And then it was very much all about how, pain is a warning system. So if we have pain, it might be because we've stepped on a nail or we've broken a bone, and we need to pay attention to that. That pain signal is a very important warning system. We've evolved to have that for a reason. But actually, what we know now is that warning system, it's not perfect, and brains aren't perfect, and sometimes they make a mistake, and that can be because we are a little bit sensitive. It can be because we've experienced trauma as children, and or growing up through life, and that our warning system might have needed to be a bit more sensitive for some reason. And that actually your brain can actually generate pain when there's other things going wrong, when it doesn't need to. And that once we understand that pain actually doesn't necessarily mean that there's harm in our body, and it can just be your brain generating it. There are these amazing techniques that can start to calm it down, and that they're not a case of you can't necessarily flick a switch and the pain is gone. For me, it was very much a case of repeating exercises over and over, and teaching myself that when I was in pain, when the symptoms were there, when they were flaring up, this could actually just be my brain. And it is very simple, but it's the thing that's worked for me.
But it's such a mindset shift, isn't it? From thinking of pain, and I guess as we're evolutionary wired to do, to think of it as a sign of injury, a sign of damage, so that we can then take those steps to prevent ourselves from being further damaged, to then seeing pain in a very different way as actually a threat response, a stress response, a mind body connection. It is such a paradigm shift. So as you were learning about that, did you feel any resistance to that idea? Did you have any kind of doubts that that fully applied to you and to your situation? Because I know many of us do when we initially come to it.
Yeah, and I think it's funny in the sense that the way that it was explained to me, once I started really sort of hearing it in a way that was so compassionately delivered, I probably at that point, it was just like bits of a puzzle were kind of fitting together, and it was this aha moment. But I mean, people had tried to explain bits of this to me before, maybe not so well, but certainly in the pain management programs there were aspects of this, and of course at that point I'd been very sure that this didn't apply to me. And I think that for me, because I had the fatigue as well, I think I felt a lot more resistance that maybe the fatigue. I mean, I sort of thought, how could it be my brain, right? I want to be well. I'm desperate to get a life back. I had all these things I used to love doing. Why would my brain sabotage me essentially like this? And I think that took a while to really think about. And I suppose it was about understanding that, this is a very human thing. There's lots of people that actually we've got evidence that happens for them. It's not that there's something weak or bad about you if your brain is doing this, and it really is a part of your brain that's trying to protect you. So I've now, because I've been well for 7 years, I have seen a lot of people struggle with these ideas, and sometimes we get people trying them, and then they come back and say, well, it doesn't work for me because I've tried it. And sometimes it's a really interesting process, because if you talk to somebody and you really start to look deeply at, well, what might my brain have needed to protect me from when I was going through the symptoms at the beginning, you can uncover things. And so resistance now is, I sort of look at it as it's such a normal part of this. Is a big leap for a lot of people, right, to start to understand, but there are so many of us that by doing this work and embracing it and sitting with, like, getting to know ourselves and our feelings and what we've been through, and actually it's incredible, the recoveries that are out there now as a result of people doing the work.
Yeah, absolutely. I always just really want to emphasize to people when they hear about this that your pain, your symptoms are real, but they can also absolutely be a stress response, a response to threats going on in your life. They can be incredibly debilitating and very much mimic structurally caused symptoms. But that recovery is absolutely possible using mind body approaches.
Mm-hmm.
So once you understood that science, Fiona, what did you actually do to implement it? Because I feel this is the question that everybody wants to ask. Like, okay, I get it. I'm having all these aha moments. I'm connecting the dots. But what do I actually do now? How do I implement this science in order to recover?
Yeah, and I think we're in this lovely position in 2026 in the sense that there's a few different techniques that people can try. And I used pain reprocessing therapy. And a lot of that is about learning the pain science and learning about how your brain can activate and sort of generate these symptoms, and starting to tune into waking up in the morning thinking, okay, I'm in a lot of pain today. And instead of going down that road of, oh, this is awful, I'm having a really bad day, it's really terrible, it's starting to get curious about, can I actually listen into my body and see, is there any unexpressed emotion that needs to come up? Am I not listening to something important in my broader life that I need to take action on that might make my brain feel safer? I used a lot of journaling. I think journaling is a fantastic tool around starting to get in touch with, what are my feelings, what are my emotions, what am I struggling with at the moment, what do I remember, what might have been traumatic that I need to process. And so journaling was a big one. There's a tool now called somatic tracking, which actually I didn't use when I recovered, but I have since used it. I ended up having surgery a couple of years into my recovery, ended up with really quite bad pain. My brain's very good at generating severe pain. I do that very well in life. So I ended up with this really awful pain in my hip, and I was limping, walking around for 6 months thinking, oh, well, they must have damaged a nerve. And so, this is just kind of, there's a genuine something is wrong in my body. And then actually had a go with somatic tracking in one session, and the pain went and the limp went after 6 months of staggering around. And actually I was completely okay again, and haven't had pain there since. So somatic tracking is something I always recommend people look at. It's very much a process of watching your body, watching the symptom, starting again to get to know what's going on for you, trying to bring up some joy maybe, and seeing what happens to the pain as you're doing that. And time in nature, starting to challenge myself. I did this much later on. For me, I had such a long history with symptoms. I didn't want to jump straight into physically pushing myself. For some people, that's the right thing to start to really understand that their body is actually working properly. And sometimes we can be in pain, but we can get evidence that our body can move and there's no physical damage. And that can be a really helpful technique in rebuilding a good relationship with your body. But it's different for everybody as to when they want to try that, I think.
And I know you use the Curable app to support
Mm.
you on this recovery journey, and I used it too. And I know I love the Curable app because it had those little kind of neuroscience lessons like in your back pocket, and you can fit them into your day. It doesn't have to be an overwhelming thing, does it? You just kind of slot them in, and then the little recovery practices as well. So you can practice little and often, like the nervous system techniques, the processing techniques, meditation. So, what was your experience with the app, Fiona?
Yeah, it was absolutely instrumental. It was fantastic. And I would now say that, because we're so many years on from this, there's brilliant YouTube channels, there's kind of articles that people have written. There's obviously some people end up deciding to go and work with a coach, where they get a little bit more one-to-one guidance. And so we really are so lucky. There are some fantastic resources, and a lot of them are either free or very low cost. And obviously, Living Proof is part of trying to share those. But Curable, for me, it broke it down. And because repetition is so important in this work, it's about you're essentially rewiring the brain, I guess, and you're teaching your brain it's safe. And so for me, using and I think it's important to say I'm not paid to promote Curable, and I only talk about them because they were so fantastic in terms of helping me. But that sense of being able to access bite-sized lessons was very useful. But some people never use anything like that, and they are they might read one book and then they're away with using these techniques on their own. And it's such an individual thing around what suits your life and your symptoms, and how busy you're, how some people have got very, very busy lives and they've got children, they've got jobs, and other people are so debilitated by their pain or their symptoms, they need to do this in very little bite-sized pieces. So it's really about following your own path, I think, and what works for you.
Yes, absolutely. And I should say that we do have an affiliate relationship with Curable. We do promote their product, but that's only because we believe in it so much, and many of us in our team used it to support our recoveries, along with other tools. The books, and today there's so many podcasts, programs, YouTube
Yeah.
channels. There's so much for people to dive into to support recovery. So what did the journey kind of look like for you? Was it smooth? Was it linear, non-linear? How long did it take? Like, just can you tell us a little bit about how it actually looked?
Yeah, so I was living with my parents when I decided to do this, because I'd had issues with I was needing carers, and I was finding it very, very difficult managing living on my own. So I had moved back in with my family. And I have a sibling in Australia, so they'd gone away for 3 weeks to go and visit her. So I sort of joke that I cleared my diary to focus on Curable, but actually my diary was kind of empty. It had I was doing bits of embroidery and little bits of writing and little bits of kind of watching a little bit of TV. I was very unwell, and but I decided for those 3 weeks that I was going to either rest and step back and look after myself, or I would be doing the Curable exercises. And not everybody has the luxury of focusing just on that, but it worked for me. And it was, I needed to, I really felt like, if I'm doing this and I'm trying to shift my views, I sort of thought I really need to give it my all. And I think it's the advice I try to pass to everyone, that these techniques are helping a lot of people, and it is worth taking them seriously and doing your best with them, because they do require some reflection, I guess. And I really recovered very quickly, and it was a matter of weeks. But again, I think some people find that difficult in terms of, they're worried that that won't happen for them, or they're worried that it will happen for them, because these big changes are really scary. It's a big change in your life if you've been ill for a long time. So actually, it's always really important to me to say that I've had friends recover, where they've taken a couple of years to work through these materials, and they've kind of pressed pause at points when it gets a bit too overwhelming. And I think that we are all on our own journey, and some people have really very quick recoveries, but that doesn't mean to say that's the only way of doing things. I was very lucky, and I did, it was very shocking, this sense of a few weeks into these exercises being so well suddenly. I had a lot to get my head around, and this is where I've got my lovely friend Lou on the call, who was so brave about using these exercises a few weeks after me, and recovered as well. And that was so incredibly important to me, because I was flung into this world where, I suddenly had this sense of like, well, did I ever need to have these symptoms? And of course I did, in the sense that they were real and I didn't know how to get out of them. I needed the right help. But if I'd had these techniques much sooner, then no, I could have been recovered much quicker. So.
Mm. Oh, that's just incredible. And I've met many people in the community that have had a relatively quick recovery like that after years and years of symptoms. But I just do want to say that, in my case, it took years. And I know many people that it did take a very long time for. Like, I had so much unlearning to do, from being in the medical system and living with symptoms for so many years, and all the beliefs that I'd built up around those. So it just did take a very long time to unlearn, and also to unlearn a lot of conditioned responses that I had to exercise and eating and drinking and sitting, and everything. It took such a long time. So if it is taking longer for you, just want to say that that's normal too, and it doesn't mean that you won't recover. You absolutely can still get there. So there's just such a range of experience really here with recovery, isn't there, Fiona?
Yeah, I think so. And I think it comes up so much for people about, oh my goodness, I've been doing these exercises for a month and I'm not really noticing many changes. Does that mean it's not going to work for me? And I think that's such a scary thing to face, but absolutely not. It can just be, it might be, you do need a little bit of outside help in terms of applying these exercises to your life or tweaking what you're using. In some cases, it's a big deal and it's a lot to get your head around, and it can just take a bit longer. And it's really important to do things in your own way, I think.
Yeah, and trust in your own journey. There's no need to compare to anybody else's journey, because that comparison is the thief of hope, isn't it? But trust in your own journey and your body's innate ability to process sensations, to heal, to recover. So I'm curious to know that, I mean, you had a relatively rapid response to the learning and to the exercises, but then as you kind of got back to life, how did that process go? Like, did you then experience any like setbacks, hurdles, as you were trying to like get back to a very
Yeah.
different way of living after being so ill for like all your young life?
Yeah, I've got a dog in the background who is slightly demanding some attention. So I'm so sorry if she barks. She's just in the background. I'm just hoping she's going to behave. She doesn't do very well with not getting attention for very long. I this was massive, and I don't know how to sum it up in terms of, I had been ill for so long, and I had no CV. I'd done a little bit of volunteering at a primary school, and I'd done a little bit of babysitting, and I did about 2 weeks of waitressing, and actually the pain had been too much when I was about 20. So I sat there and I remember saying to somebody, I am unemployable. How on earth am I supposed to rebuild from here? And I really want to acknowledge that this is a really scary thing, and it can make it difficult to recover. In terms of, for some people, I know they sit there and they think, well, what am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to rebuild? Because I was living with family, I was very lucky that I didn't have to immediately jump into doing things that I wasn't ready for. So I started volunteering. I was astonished when somebody said yes to me, to taking me on even for that, because I just thought, well, what have I got to offer? But actually, somebody was very kind and said to me, really working is going to be about what have you got to bring, in terms of, are you a nice person? Are you friendly? Are you kind of turning up on time? And you can show them those things quite quickly. So don't worry. And I didn't really believe her, but it turned out to be true. And I ended up, I've done things very, very slowly. It's only about 4 years into my recovery that I moved into working full time. And that was a big moment. That took a lot of, I don't want to say that, obviously I wasn't having symptoms, but I think with this work, when you get fear coming up, sometimes because you're used to, your brain is so good at generating pain, that can kind of come up when you're scared. So it took me a lot of work, and I needed a lot of support around building up to that level, and it was hard. And then I realized, actually, because I ended up, I'm now training to be a clinical psychologist. This is my absolute passion, and because I was going in this direction of working with people, I realized that actually this big scary thing of working full time was something I really loved, and I got a sense of pride from, and I got a sense of confidence that I could manage. And it's just been, I mean, I can't say I love every single day of my job, and I get, now I'm 7 years into things, I get my days where I'd rather not go to work, or I'd rather sort of sit and see a friend rather than go to work. But mostly I love my job and I love the people I work with, and I feel so excited to get to do my job. And so that has been part of it. And I think ideally, if people have these recoveries, I would always say try and take some time to think about doing something that is going to be meaningful to you, if that's possible, and something that is going to add to your recovery in some ways, because I certainly didn't want to have had this big recovery and then spend my life doing something I didn't enjoy. So yeah, it's just been the most massive journey, and I don't know, I wouldn't want to go through it again, right? This was like, recovery is the biggest blessing, but this has been really, really hard with some difficult times. And we had a pandemic a year and a few months into my recovery. We had a pandemic and the whole world shut down, and I was sitting there thinking, well, hang on, I'm just opening things up and I'm getting used to going out and meeting friends, and I'm discovering who I am as a healthy person, and the whole world shut down. So I would definitely recommend not having that experience if people go on their own recovery journey. But hopefully that's mostly behind us. So yeah.
So fast forwarding to today, Fiona, can you just tell us a little bit about what life looks like today and how you continue to look after your health, and maybe just a little bit about what recovery actually means to you?
Oh, that is a thing to even touch on. And it's just, I mean, my recovery is just complete and utter joy and freedom, and it's given me the chance to stretch myself. I worked very hard to end up, I've just started in my first year of training to be a clinical psychologist, because there was this sense of, these techniques help people. I do not want other kids and other adults to lose the years to symptoms that I lost. I really, in an ideal world, I shouldn't have lost all of those years. I shouldn't have had the experiences I did, because these amazing techniques exist. So I really, really want people to not go through what I did. So my recovery personally is based around building this career to help people, and some people recover and they don't want anything to do with, they just want to walk away from their health problems, and that is also okay. But I get to do what I want. I get to hike. I go to dance classes, which I always loved as a kid. So I go to Lindy Hop, and I go to bits of salsa and bits of um, adult jazz. I'm trying to go to hip hop. I'm not a hip hopper, but I kind of try my best. I've been to ice skating classes recently. I've done bits of traveling. I started learning to row last year, which I never had any ideas around being a rower, and it's been fantastic to start really building some strength. And I kind of, it took me a good year or two to rebuild some fitness, but my strength is still not quite what I'd like it to be, and it is just an ongoing battle. But I get to, for example, today I've been working all day, and then I've still got energy in the evening, and I've got the ability to sit up and talk and everything. And, I'm not struggling in any way. So I get to do things like this, but I can also see friends in the evening, and I have, I get to walk my dog, and it's just freedom. And it's just, for all the difficult bits, I always say that the really hard thing is living with living with chronic symptoms, chronic pain. Recovery is hard, but it's not anywhere near as hard as being ill. So I have had some very, very deep joys, and I think that recovery work for me, it's ongoing, because it's about healing, right, from the past. It's about learning about who I am and what I need, and my emotions, my triggers. And so I find it very rewarding to continue to look at myself, and to continue to kind of, just kind of feel, I suppose it's like self-compassion and self-love, and just kind of getting enjoyment from life. And then life happens in recovery, right? You can't stop. There's bereavements, and there's there's life just happens for everybody, and being recovered doesn't stop that. So I've had my fair share of challenges along the way that I've also had to focus on. But I would recommend this to anybody. It is the most incredible experience to go from I mean, such a deep level of suffering and finding life so hard. And I was not a good patient. I hated being in pain. I was very depressed with it. I was very unhappy, and I kind of found it very difficult to hang on to any kind of hope. And a lot of people do a lot better with symptoms and live a really good life with their symptoms. And I think that's amazing. And you know, for some people, these techniques, they are management techniques. They don't necessarily get every single person completely out of pain. And I still think that the improvement, it makes it worth it. Um, but I just feel such a lot of hope around my future, and such a lot of a sense of like anything's possible. And particularly when I think about recovery, it's like, well, you know, it's a snowball effect where more and more people are recovering, and what's going to come from that. That makes me so excited, because yeah, the idea of more people getting this is just amazing.
Mm. I'm so delighted for you, Fiona, that you were able to reclaim your life, reclaim your identity outside of this awful, awful experience that you went through your young adulthood. And you know, also you are the type of person now that wants to take this experience and use it to help others. And you know, you really are just amazing the way you share your story so openly and vulnerably, so that people can learn from you. So just with that benefit of hindsight, I'd love for you to just reflect back and talk about what the key lessons were for you from this recovery journey.
Yeah. That's a really, oh, that's a really good one. And I think I know everybody's got their sort of different things. So I I feel like I got things wrong in terms of, obviously I feel like the medics involved with my care were very they were very unkind, and there was a lot of bullying, and there was a lot of explaining things badly. And as a result, I kind of didn't really fully understand what they were trying to say to me, and I became very resistant. And I think that for me, everything changed because I had another look at, you know, the ideas that I that helped me. Yes, they were presented in a different way, and there's a sort of, they've developed in a way that, you know, maybe when I was 11 or 12 they weren't quite established. But I would always say to people, if you are sure that, you know, you have this sense of, oh, my symptoms are not in my head and I'm not making them up, I think it's really important to just have another look at what people in our community, in this lovely recovery community, are saying, because it's definitely not that your symptoms are in your head. It's definitely not that you're weak or you're making it up. And I really wouldn't be here in this lovely position without just actually going back with an open mind and saying, okay, I'm going to start from basics and listen to what's being said to me. um, I really feel like we've got this amazing recovery community. It's grown and grown. There's lots of passionate people. You know, these ideas are incredible because they give people their lives back. So, um, you know, you're not on your own. If you are wanting to try these tools with your symptoms, you don't have to battle through on your own, and you don't necessarily have to pay anybody. Actually, there's lots of people that do give their time for free in trying to help people through things. And just great books and great podcasts and great YouTube videos. So draw on that. Don't do this on your own. Pain is so isolating. It's so tough. It can be that, you know, if you're in pain, you're on your own in the sense of day to day. There's not necessarily people around you. But actually now we are a big community and we do care, and so reach out. Um, the next thing I'd sort of written for this slide was, yeah, don't compare your path to others. I think that just touches on the fact that we are all on our own journeys, and just because other people recover very quickly, you don't have to do that. For some people, I've definitely spoken to people where they've said, I've been in pain for so long, I'm actually quite scared of what life would look like without it. And that is okay. Pain is traumatic. You have to do your best to cope with it. People are thrown into this situation quite often and have to muddle through. And it is okay if it's scary and you want to take your time to do it more slowly. And it's okay if you also, you know, actually in reality, for some people it's too much to completely step away from the pain. And you know, there's all sorts of reasons behind that, but that is okay. And I think self-compassion and looking after yourself is the number one. But also, if you have a really quick recovery, that's also great too, and you don't have to do it slowly. And And you don't have to, I think, in terms of sharing your story, you don't have to have been suffering for years and years and years. You know, I love these recovery stories where people have had symptoms for a few months and then got their life back. That's all like also like come and be part of our community and share your story and share your wisdom, because that's also meaningful. Like any pain is awful, any symptoms are awful. I wanted to highlight joy because I think a huge part of recovery is around we're trying to understand our feelings, and we're trying to understand the fear that might have tipped our brains into generating symptoms. And actually, we lose sight of what it feels like to feel joy. And I know if you're in pain, it can feel like the hardest thing in the world to even think about, what might joy feel like. But actually, joy and awe, they can be really accessible. They can be, you can sort of feel them over really tiny little things, and actually just starting to build into your life this sense of like, what brings me joy, what might it can be sitting outside and looking at nice leaves on the trees and sunshine and nice little bits of nature. That is very calming for your nervous system. That there's a reason why I'm saying that it's not just about building in some happiness for the sake of it. It's very hard to be in pain if you're feeling joy. And I think life is supposed to be enjoyed. I think life is so precious and so short. So again, if we're living in pain, it's the last thing that we're thinking about. But actively focusing on that and trying to find a way to get it back into your life is great. I wanted to talk about how recovery is an ongoing journey. And although for me, I'm not physically struggling with symptoms, I do have days where, I might have a stress headache and it might be very mild compared to what I ever dealt with before. Or I might be, feeling a bit fatigued, but these are opportunities to kind of go back to basics with the recovery work, and these symptoms come up for a reason. And even if I'm not getting symptoms, recovery for me is so much about getting to know myself and learning how to look after myself and learning how to heal. And it's okay if it's an ongoing bit of work. And I find it's so enriching. It's not a negative to me. It's not this sense of, I'm having to still do work on myself. It's like, I really love these little nuggets of wisdom that kind of come my way through life and through journaling or through thinking about my journey with symptoms. So embrace that, I'd say, and recognize that can be a really, really wonderful process. And yeah, the last thing I put was it's okay to have hope. I was really, really scared of feeling hope when I was in pain. I just didn't want to. I was so depressed, and I think the suffering was such a level that I didn't even want to imagine having hope. It was so painful, and I thought, what if I get my hopes up and I try all these techniques, and then I'm still in pain at the end of it, and I'm on my own, and I have to walk away from it all, and nothing's changed. And the idea of that was very frightening, and I know that other people feel that. But hope, to me, it's like joy. It's one of those things that starts to work on the nervous system in itself, and it's part of healing. And it's okay to start looking at the good that might come about, because these techniques are really helping people in their thousands, right? We know that there's lots and lots of people out there telling their stories and saying that these techniques help. So it's actually quite safe at this point to have a bit of hope, and dip your toes in the water. I mean, it is a big step. I think sometimes people really do lose all hope, but yes, I can't recommend it enough, just to sort of just like daring to kind of step onto this path and think that maybe things could be different for you, and seeing where it takes you.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And just dwelling on that point of hope, I think when I found this neuroscience, it was honestly the only thing that had offered me hope in a very, very long time. And I think that did actually have a powerful impact on my nervous system. And anytime I hit as kind of a small bump in the road on that recovery journey, I came back to this idea like, this offers hope, and that hope is grounded in neuroscience. And I just clung to that, and it really kind of spurred me on to recovering. So I'm so glad that you mentioned that, Fiona, and thank you so much for sharing your story. It's just so inspiring. And I know people will have a lot of questions that they want to ask you. I've seen things coming in on the chat, and also people can ask you in person. So what I want to do is just to hand over to Dan. But before that, just to say a very big thank you for sharing your story with us today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for listening. It's been such a lovely thing to take part.